Double stack 1911s have suddenly become all the rage all over again, and for good reason. Increased capacity, now we got red dots, good triggers, all that, but they are expensive. Well, coming up today, we have the least expensive one on the market yet. This is from EAA, the Girsan Witness 2311, tabletop review and field strip, coming up next on GBGuns. Now, if you're new to the channel, as with all videos, I'm going to go rather deeper than a lot of other channels do. That means these videos are long. Check the chapter markers if you want to skip a section. It's also in the video description where you can get right to the part that you're interested in. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy learning about the EAA Witness 2311. Opening the case, we have the box and a manual for the red dot. The first couple thousand of these are going to come with one of these far dots. Now, I've heard people laugh at these far dots. I had one on a MC28 that I've had for a few years. No reason to have any problems with it. They are, however, a bit fragile. In fact, the manual itself says it's for 9mm tops. But 4 MOA red dot, about 20,000 hours. Not bad for free, right? There's the gun. Up here we have in a baggie the cover plate with iron sight and screws where the optic currently is, in case you wanted to swap two irons. Normally I review guns as they come out of the box. Since this came with a dot, those of you wanting to see us review guns with a dot, you'll see it. Up top, pretty minimalist. We have our federally mandated lock and our brush. Only one magazine comes with the gun, which would have been a problem with these double stack 1911-2011 magazines if Durmag didn't exist. That's right, Durmag makes the magazines for the Springfield Prodigy, and they are considerably less expensive than the other brands out there. I found them to be excellent magazines, so if you want more than a mag, and after you've saved hundreds of dollars on one of these, and you're upset you only get one mag, well, for 30, 40 bucks you can pick up some of these great magazines, witness windows on both sides, and all of the love that Durmag puts into their magazines. On to the manual, since usually there's some good stuff in here that makes you feel kind of dumb when you break your gun by not following it. First off, there's the tech specs. They're super tiny. Don't worry about it. I'll put them in larger spec. Check the pinned comment for the full review article over at our website, gbgunsdepot.com. That's where we'll have this, as well as links where you can find this under $1,000, which is pretty nice. Looking for ammunition restrictions, the only thing that I saw in here was a warning that the use of reloaded, high-pressure, or hand-loaded ammunition can be dangerous and will void the warranty. I'm going to assume that by that they mean don't plus P this, but with a 4 1/4 inch barrel you shouldn't need to. 9mm is developed around a 4-inch barrel, so when you go longer than that you're getting extra velocity anyways. There's no need for plus P. Nothing else in the manual really stands out. Every time I take apart a 1911, I get in wonderful internet arguments with folks who say I'm doing it wrong because I always do it by the manual, and each manual is a little bit different. In this case, it says to do the barrel bushing first, so that's how we're going to do this one. They use photos, which are great because they're realistic. However, that can make it a little difficult to see highlighted spots. However, most of the parts on this gun are big enough, and you've got a nice exploder diagram showing the different models in here, including other calibers and other barrel lengths. I wonder if that means we'll be getting those soon from EAA as well. Other than that, pretty straightforward in the manual. The note on the dot I already mentioned, keep it at 9mm. Also, this far dot weighs 0.6 of an ounce, which is pretty awesome. 0.6 of an ounce. You know, anytime you add mass, reciprocating mass to the slide, you're increasing the chances of a malfunction. Having a super lightweight dot is something I like. I wonder if that's even less than this rear sight is. I wonder if we've lightened the slide by going with the far dot. I'll get this stuff out of the way and we'll take a look at the gun. One quick note for those of you saying, well, I've never heard of Girsan before. First off, where have you been? We've had Girsan on this channel for years. But secondly, I cut this off camera, but this was hanging on the gun, limited lifetime warranty from Girsan. There's the QR code. Pay attention to stuff like this before you toss it, because if you have an issue, you can either go through EAA, the importer, or wherever this link takes you. Another note on that far dot before we get into the gun. Pretty cool tool that they include that surprisingly few optic makers do. So you stab your screwdriver or wrench through this thing, and then it tells you how much you're adjusting when you turn it. why isn't this more common, or at least label the dang things in the manual or on the optic itself. It drives me nuts every time we go to zero that it's just kind of a guessing game until you figure out which direction it's going. Nice of Fardot to include this. Back to our standard gun review. Show clear and check, do we have magazine ejection or release? Looks like maybe a light ejection or release, but it's going to kick out nicely because we've got polymer and a bare metal magazine. Even when you go with coated metal like the Duramags, see if that changes. Oh, look at that. We get more hop. Another reason why I love these things. All right, so it is clear. We have ambidextrous safeties. The magazine release, of course, is just one-sided, but the safeties work on both sides. Coming up front, we have some front cocking serrations at the far nose of the gun, giving it kind of a shorter look, even though 4 1/4 inches, like I said, is perfect for 9mm. The gun feels much lighter in hand than I was expecting. To be honest, when I picked it up at the shop, I was like, wow, this is not bad at all. They did a pretty good job of cutting down on weight and cutting down on cost to be able to get this to us at the price it's available at. One of the ways that they did that is this does have a barrel bushing. It's not a bull barrel system. That means that we've got a smaller outer diameter barrel and a bushing up front. So those of you familiar with classic 1911s, this will be much easier to field strip and be a little more common and familiar to you. See our bushing up there, which has everything locked tight. I've known Girsan to make good guns, so I have a little doubt on this. We do have some wiggle side to side, no up and down, no rattle in the gun whatsoever. Notice we've got full pick rail across the front, which is nice. Not every light or laser or accessory fits perfectly, and apparently this gun was test fired. It's good to know. Squared off trigger guard, which some folks like, others don't. No texture on the front of the trigger guard here, so it is for the American style of shooting. Generally, aside from Jerry Michalik, nobody puts their finger up here in the US. You can see that we have some rounding to the trigger guard, but not much of an undercut. There's not a lot of space to raise, and there is not a double undercut on this. Our trigger does not appear to be adjustable at all, and while we're in here, we'll do our trigger talk, and this is one spot that kind of surprised me. Usually these things are known for light, short, crisp triggers, and we've got just a wee bit of pre-travel, and it's heavy. It's a heavy, heavy trigger. Much heavier than I expected. Whoops, reset is so short, I missed it. Here we go, here's our reset. Very short, takes you right back to the wall. So it is a gun that can be run quickly on the trigger. It's going to require a little more strength to do it. Initially picking this up, I was disappointed at that, but then I thought, well, for the money you're saving with this being $400 or $500 less than the nearest competitor that I'm aware of, you can easily do a trigger job for around $100, depending on where you get your parts and how adept you are at doing it at home. So I don't think that's a problem. I used to have a video on how to do 1911 trigger jobs using one of the trigger job in a bag type setups from Cylinder and Slide. However, YouTube made me take it down because it was gunsmithing. So you have to figure it out on your own or go to a channel who's not afraid to get deleted. The entire front of our front strap has some nice checkering that is aggressive enough to hold, but not biting into my hand. At least not currently. We'll see how it is at the range. We've got a nice flared magwell here. Though I don't think a magwell is necessary for reloads if you just practice. In fact, you can see we do have a small lip here. This isn't perfectly feeding in. It does from the rear and a little bit from the sides, but once you get forward, that lip means it's not perfect. However, I find this toe kick here to trap my hand nicely. So if you have large hands, that's a nice way to trap the hand, and squeezing with the pinky is a great way to lower the nose of the gun, which is where folks tend to have issues with red dots. Speaking of dots, you'll notice that this does have fiber optic backup rears in it. When we get to the range, we'll have to try shooting with those irons to see if they are on for this height of front sight or not. And of course, we'll get the dot itself is zeroed. Like other double stack 1911s, your lower is polymer, including, it appears, the mainspring housing. Nice, big and curved, sharply curved beaver tail, and the grip safety sticks out pretty far. The grip safety itself also has a bit more force and resistance to it than I've felt on other guns, so you'll want to make sure you have a good grip on it. It's going to require a little more of the shooter than one of the guns going for twice the price. That's the way things are. Slide to frame fit in the back. We have a little bit of lateral movement, but you can see that things are generally well fit. Not the polished to fit fitment that you would get on, once again, a gun at twice the price. If that doesn't bother you, you're good to go. If it does bother you, be prepared to spend another $1,000. It doesn't, I don't care, it doesn't bother me. Coming around the right side of the gun, see a rather classic 1911 style ejection port with a little bit of flare there where brass sometimes tinkles out. That of course depends on the load. Something a lot of people don't seem to realize is that ejection on a semi-automatic pistol, aside from a few guns like the Desert Eagle, is a passive action. It's all dependent on slide velocity, how quickly the slide is moving. So if you have softer ammo, lower energy, you're going to have less ejection. If you have hotter energy, you're going to have a more violent ejection. And that's where sometimes people get into trouble with dots, is between their wrist strength and the energy of the round. The brass will deflect off the dot just wrong enough to end up back in the ejection port, and to the shooter it looks and feels like it's a stovepipe, but it's not a gun malfunction, it's a problem with the dot. This dot is nice and small and actually sits pretty far back from the ejection port, so I'm hoping we won't have that issue. But as always, we'll run at least 11 different loads through this gun, and in regular, decently firm grip, see if it causes any issues or not. Speaking of slide movement, I did notice, at least brand new, not broken in, it's a little stiff. It feels like a stiff recoil spring, and I do have a small hang up when the barrel first goes to unlock. Right there is a little tight, and then in the back, maybe clearing the ejector, I don't know, because the hammer's already back, so the mainspring is already compressed. There's a little bit of extra bump right there. And that concerns me a little bit because that's what plagued the early Springfield prodigies. Will that plague this gun? We'll find out in the range video. Next, let's field strip the Witness 2311 and take a look inside the gun. So if you're new to these, this round piece in the bottom here is what's holding the barrel bushing in place, and we've got to get that out of the way. That can require, you can do some with your thumb, some requires a little bit of force. I like to cheat and use a wrench. Recently over on the depot I was talking about these Real Avid pistol tools. This has one built in and it's pretty handy. Tilt that over the end, alongside, rotate, and now we can get our spring and plug out. Everything should be unlocked. So we'll bring that cutout, that small one there, over the slide stop release. And with that there, we can push through on this pin, remove our slide stop release, and bring our slide off the front. This gives us a look inside the frame. I don't know if this is polymer or aluminum, but it's pretty darn lightweight. If you're new to handguns, the weight debate is a constant one. The heavier a gun is, generally the softer it shoots on the range. The lighter a gun is, the easier it is to carry. So it's a constant debate back and forth. And in marketing, they tend to advertise whatever they want to sell to or they think you're going to buy. Alright, now with the other way we can get our guide rod out, it is a nearly full-length guide rod, and yet we did not have to do any magic tricks. That's a nice trick. The GIA length guide rod is usually about half this length and kind of comes flopping out. A lot of people like the full length guide rod. They say it helps prevent spring binding. That could be true. I've not had a spring bind on me in a 1911. However, I have noticed that when you've got extra weight in the nose, like a full-length guide rod, it tends to be a smoother shooting gun. We're going to knock this link down, and that's going to let us bring the barrel out the front once we get the bushing off. Bushing has to rotate to 45 degrees and come straight off, and now our barrel comes out. This gives us a look inside the slide. You can see this is what the hardcore guys would call a 70 series, meaning it does not have an extra trigger drop safety in there. But everything looks to be fairly cleanly machined. It is very, very well lubricated from the factory. Getting all over my hands here. Got a nice long polished feed ramp there. And next we'll check for chamber support. Chamber fitment is likely to tell you how reliable a gun is going to be. Chamber support is likely to tell you how a bad day might go down. And that is, we're going to drop it around. This is some Liberty Civil Defense. I like this because the nickel plating is corrosion resistance, so these stay pretty longer. Also helps reduce friction. And drop it in and listen for a plunk. Just like that. That was a perfect sound. And make sure that we can rotate it freely, which we can. That lets us know we've got a good smooth chamber. That helps with feeding and extraction. Chamber support, how much of the brass beyond that bend is exposed. And as you can see, just a little bit, not as much as a Glock, but overall pretty well supported. Now when I mentioned a bad day, that's because should you have a case rupture or want to rupture, let's say it's overpressure or reload, those things that were in the manual about don't use. Wherever the brass doesn't have support is where it's going to want to rupture. Now that spot of the case that was exposed in this barrel is one of the strongest parts of the casing, so not really too much of a worry. Other guns it's cut away more, or it doesn't feed up as deeply on the shoulder. And when that happens, you get the explosion happening and coming out here into your hand instead of pushing the round out the barrel. So that's why I always check for those. Reassembly is the inverse of disassembly. And while I do that, I'll tell you about what you'll see in the range video. Take this out. I'm hoping Miss Tia will be up for shooting this one. So you get two opinions when we shoot it. But you'll see absolute first shots through the gun, call them cold shots. There's no highlight reels on the GBGuns channel, just reality. We'll do the first shots through it. We'll do full magazine +1 to see how these magazines run. This one is made by Checkmate. They're an established brand, pretty good. I believe they're the same company that makes Staccato's mags. However, they are, if you can see, an older generation of the double stack 1911 mag than the Duramags are. So I'll bring the Duramags out as well. They should work. We'll test for that. Then we'll do what's for dinner, testing 10 additional loads in addition to the range load to see what the gun will eat. As I bring the slide back, I'm lining up that little link, so I've got a clear window through here. That lets me drop this in. And then when that's in, I can line up that cutout for the top of this slide release and push it in place. With that there, I can now feed my spring back on. Difficult to do through the camera, I don't have the same depth perception. So once we've proven the gun runs, and it runs full mag, and it runs a variety of loads, using what's for dinner, take it over to the spinner for sights and trigger control. That might be a tough one with the trigger this heavy. We'll find out. Then some practical accuracy before giving you concluding thoughts. As always, full specs details where to find these things and thoughts that happen after the range, since the range videos are filmed in a real-time style format. Head on over to gbgunsdepot.com or check the pinned comment in this video for the full review. That's the EAA Girsan Witness 2311 tabletop review and field strip. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.